The woman stumbled off the train into the dust and blazing Montana sun, with nothing but the torn dress on her back, and a gash across her temple that had long since dried into a dark crimson line. Her mind as blank as the endless sky stretching overhead. She stood on the wooden platform of Bannack, Montana, swaying slightly as passengers rushed past her with purpose and destination, their faces blurring together like watercolors in rain. The year was 1876, and the mining town bustled with the kind of fevered energy that came from gold still hiding in the hills and men willing to die for it. But the woman noticed none of this. She touched her forehead where the pain throbbed, her fingers coming away clean despite the dried blood, and tried to remember her name, where she had come from, why she was here. Nothing came, just emptiness where her life should have been. "Miss, you cannot stand there." A conductor touched her elbow, his voice impatient. "You are blocking the way." She turned to him, her lips parting to speak, but no words formed. What could she say when she did not know anything at all? The conductor's expression shifted from annoyance to concern, but another passenger called for his attention, and he hurried away, leaving her alone in the crowd. Her legs carried her forward without thought, moving her off the platform and onto the dirt street where horses kicked up clouds of dust and wagons rattled past. Buildings lined both sides, their false fronts painted with signs advertising goods and services that meant nothing to her. She walked until her legs trembled, until the sun beat down so fiercely that sweat soaked through her already filthy dress. Then she simply stopped, standing in the middle of the street like a lost child, and closed her eyes. "Easy now." Strong hands caught her before she fell. "I have got you." The voice was deep and steady, and when she opened her eyes, she found herself staring into a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of sage and a jaw shadowed with several days of stubble. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dusty leather chaps over worn denim and a hat that had seen better years. A cowboy, though she did not know how she knew that word when she knew nothing else. "Thank you," she whispered. "When did you last eat?" He asked, studying her face with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable but somehow did not. She opened her mouth to answer and realized she had no idea. "I do not know." His eyes narrowed, taking in the wound on her forehead, the state of her dress, the way she trembled in his arms. "What is your name?" The question hung between them like something physical. She searched the blankness in her mind, reaching for anything, any fragment of identity. Tears burned behind her eyes. "I do not know that either." Most men would have left her then, would have handed her off to the sheriff or the church ladies and gone about their business. But Vernon Yale looked at this broken woman with no name and no past, and something in his chest tightened in a way it never had before. He had spent 32 years building walls around his heart, keeping himself separate, needing no one. Yet here was someone who needed everything. "Come on," he said, adjusting his grip to support her weight more fully. "You need food and rest. We can figure out the rest later." She should have been afraid. A woman alone with a strange man in a rough mining town had every reason to fear. But when she looked into his face, she saw only genuine concern, the kind that could not be faked. So she nodded and let him lead her down the street to a small restaurant that smelled of coffee and frying meat. The other diners stared as Vernon guided her to a table in the corner, but he ignored them all, settling her into a chair with surprising gentleness for a man of his size. When the waitress came, he ordered steak and potatoes, bread and butter, coffee and water, more food than the woman thought she could possibly eat. "Start slow," Vernon advised when the plates arrived. "Your stomach might not take kindly to too much at once." She picked up the fork, her hands shaking, and took a small bite of potato. The taste exploded across her tongue, rich and salty and wonderful, and suddenly she was ravenous. She forced herself to eat slowly, aware of Vernon watching her with those steady sage-colored eyes. "The cut on your head," he said after a while, "looks a few days old. You remember how you got it?" She touched the wound gingerly, trying to pull up any memory. "Nothing." "No." "Do you remember getting on the train? Where you came from?" "Nothing," she said, and the word came out broken. "I remember nothing at all. It is like I did not exist until I stepped off that train." Vernon leaned back in his chair, his jaw working as he thought. He had seen men lose their memories after head wounds during the war, had watched them struggle to piece together who they had been. Usually the memories returned in time, sometimes all at once, sometimes in fragments. But looking at this woman, fragile and lost and somehow still holding herself together, he felt something shift inside him. "Well then," he said finally, "I suppose you need a name, cannot go around being nobody." She looked up from her plate, surprise flickering across her features. "You would give me a name. Someone has to." He studied her face, the delicate bone structure, the unusual amber color of her eyes, the way her hair fell in dark waves despite its tangled state. "How about Aurora? Means dawn. Seems fitting for someone starting fresh." "Aurora," she repeated, testing the sound of it. A small smile touched her lips, the first he had seen. "I like it, but I need more than just a first name, don't I?" Vernon glanced down at his own weathered hands, calloused from years of ranch work, scarred from 100 small injuries. He thought about his life, his ranch struggling in the shadow of the mining boom, the loneliness he pretended not to feel. Then he looked at Aurora again and made a decision that would change everything. "Galloway," he said. "Aurora Galloway, that work for you?" "Yes." Her eyes shone with gratitude and something else, something that made his heart beat faster. "Thank you. Not just for the name, but for this, for helping me when you did not have to. Everyone needs help sometimes." He signaled the waitress for more coffee. "Question is, what happens next? You have anywhere to go, anyone who might be looking for you?" Aurora shook her head slowly. "I have nothing. No memories, no money, no possessions except this ruined dress. I do not even know if anyone is looking for me or if I was running from something. I am completely lost." The desperation in her voice cut through Vernon like a knife. He knew he should take her to the sheriff, let the law handle it. But Sheriff Morrison was more interested in keeping the miners happy than helping lost women, and the church ladies would gossip and judge and probably put her to work scrubbing floors while they looked down their noses at her. Aurora needed more than that. She needed a purpose, something to hold on to while she figured out who she was. "I have a ranch," Vernon heard himself say. "About 5 miles outside town. It is not much, just me and my foreman trying to keep cattle alive while everyone else goes crazy over gold. My housekeeper quit last month to follow her daughter to California, and the place has gone to hell without someone to manage things properly. I could use help, and you need a place to stay. Seems like we could help each other." Aurora stared at him, hope and uncertainty warring in her expression. "You would trust me in your home when you know nothing about me. You could be anyone, could have done anything before you lost your memory. Does not change the fact that right now, in this moment, you need help and I can give it." Vernon met her eyes steadily. "I am offering you honest work for room and board. Nothing more, nothing less. You would have your own space and my foreman John lives in the bunkhouse, so you would not be alone with me if that concerns you. I am not asking anything improper." "I did not think you were." Aurora's voice was soft but certain. "I do not know why, but I trust you, Vernon Yale." Hearing his name on her lips sent a warmth through his chest that he tried to ignore. This was about helping someone in need, nothing more. He could not afford to feel anything else. But even as he told himself that, he knew it was already too late. They finished the meal in companionable silence, and then Vernon took Aurora to the general store where he bought her 3 simple dresses, undergarments, a nightgown, a brush, soap, and sturdy boots. She protested at the expense, but he waved her objections away. "Consider it an advance on your wages," he said. "You cannot work in that torn dress and you need the basics. We will keep track and you can pay me back once you are settled." The woman at the counter, Mrs. Chen, who ran the store with her husband, gave Aurora a kind smile. "There is a room in the back where you can change, dear. That dress looks like it has been through a war." When Aurora emerged in a simple blue cotton dress with her hair brushed and pinned back, Vernon felt his breath catch. She was beautiful, more than he had realized under the grime and exhaustion, but it was more than physical beauty. There was strength in the set of her shoulders, intelligence in her eyes, a quiet dignity that even total memory loss could not erase. "Better?" she asked, a hint of self-consciousness in her voice. "Much." He cleared his throat and picked up her parcels. "Ready to see your new home." They rode out of Bannack in Vernon's wagon as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Aurora sat beside him, watching the landscape roll past with wide eyes, trying to determine if anything looked familiar. Nothing did. The mountains were strangers, the prairie grass foreign, the very air a mystery. But somehow, sitting next to Vernon as the wagon creaked along the rutted road, she felt safer than she had since waking on that train. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to know, wanting to fill the silence with something other than her own fears. Vernon glanced at her, seeming surprised by the question. "Not much to tell. I bought it 6 years ago with money I saved from the war and working other ranches. Got about 500 acres, maybe 200 head of cattle, some horses. It is good land, near a creek that runs year-round. Should be thriving, but the mining boom has made everything difficult. Everyone wants to strike it rich quick, and there is not much interest in honest ranching work. Lost 2 hands last spring to gold fever. But you stayed. I am not interested in gold. I am interested in building something that lasts, something real." His hands were steady on the reins, his voice matter-of-fact. "My father drifted from job to job his whole life, chasing dreams that never panned out. Died broke and bitter. I swore I would be different, that I would build something solid, something I could be proud of. The ranch is that." Aurora heard the determination in his words, the quiet pride, and respected it. "It sounds wonderful. It is hard work. The house needs repairs I have not had time to make. The books are a mess because I am better with cattle than numbers, and the place is not fit for company. But it is mine, and it is honest." As they topped a rise, Vernon pointed ahead to where a collection of buildings nestled in a valley between rolling hills. A 2-story farmhouse, weathered but sturdy, stood beside a large barn, corrals, and a smaller bunkhouse. Even in the fading light, Aurora could see the potential, the bones of something that could be truly beautiful with care and attention. "It is perfect," she breathed. Vernon shot her a skeptical look. "You have not seen inside yet. Might change your mind when you see the disaster I have been living in." But when they reached the house, and he helped her down from the wagon, leading her through the front door, Aurora only smiled. Yes, there was dust everywhere and dishes piled in the sink and papers scattered across every surface. But there were also strong wooden floors, large windows letting in the last of the day's light, a stone fireplace, and furniture that was simple but well made. It was a home, or could be, and for someone with no past and no place to belong, it looked like possibility. "I can work with this," she said firmly. Vernon set her parcels down and removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. It was supposed to be for guests, but I have never had any. There is a bed and a dresser, and the window looks out over the valley. Bathroom is at the end of the hall. I will sleep down here on the couch until we can fix up another bedroom properly. You do not have to do that. This is your home. And you are my guest and employee, and I will not have you feeling uncomfortable. His tone left no room for argument. Get yourself settled. I will make us some supper, though I warn you my cooking is nothing special. Aurora climbed the stairs, her new boots tapping softly on the wood, and found the room Vernon had described. It was simple but clean, with a quilt on the bed and curtains at the window. She set down her things and moved to look outside, watching as the sun finally dipped below the mountains, leaving the sky ablaze with color. She had no idea who she had been before. Maybe she had family somewhere, people who loved her and were searching for her. Maybe she had been running from something terrible. Maybe she had been nobody at all. But standing in this room, in this house, on this ranch, with a name given by a kind stranger and the promise of honest work, Aurora Galloway felt something that might have been hope. Over the next weeks, Aurora threw herself into making the ranch house into a proper home. She woke before dawn each morning, lit the stove, and made breakfast for Vernon and John, the foreman who turned out to be a weathered man of 60 with kind eyes and a talent for working with horses. She cleaned and organized, mended curtains and washed windows, brought order to the chaos of Vernon's paperwork, and discovered she had a knack for numbers that surprised them both. "Where did you learn bookkeeping?" Vernon asked one evening, watching her work through his accounts with practiced efficiency. Aurora paused, frowning. "I have no idea. I just looked at the numbers and knew what to do with them. Maybe I did this before in my other life. Maybe." Vernon leaned against the desk, closer than necessary, and Aurora felt her pulse quicken. "You are full of surprises, Aurora Galloway." She looked up at him, at the way the lamplight caught the angles of his face, and felt something shift between them. It had been building since that first day, this awareness, this pull. They were careful around each other, proper, maintaining the boundaries of employer and employee. But in small moments like this, when their hands brushed passing plates at dinner, or when he taught her to ride and held her steady in the saddle, the attraction was undeniable. "I should finish these," Aurora said softly, dropping her gaze back to the ledger. Vernon straightened, clearing his throat. "Right. I will be in the barn if you need anything." But as the weeks turned into months, maintaining distance became increasingly difficult. Aurora proved herself invaluable, not just in the house but around the ranch. She learned to tend the vegetable garden, to preserve food for winter, to handle the chickens Vernon bought to provide fresh eggs. She was quick and clever, unafraid of hard work, and possessed a quiet strength that Vernon found himself admiring more each day. For Aurora, watching Vernon work his ranch was a revelation. He was up before dawn and rarely stopped until dark, mending fences, tending cattle, breaking horses with a patience and skill that spoke of deep knowledge and care. He was fair with John, generous to his neighbors, and honest in all his dealings. He was, Aurora thought, simply the best man she had ever known, even if she could not remember any others. One afternoon in late September, Aurora was hanging laundry when she heard shouting from the direction of the creek. She dropped the sheet she had been pinning and ran, her heart pounding, following the sound to where Vernon and John were trying to free a calf that had become stuck in mud at the creek's edge. "Get the rope," Vernon yelled, waist deep in mud himself, trying to support the terrified animal. Aurora did not hesitate. She grabbed the rope from John's horse and waded in, the cold water and sucking mud making every step a struggle. Between the three of them, they managed to get the rope around the calf and pull it free, but in the process, Aurora slipped and went down hard, the muddy water closing over her head. Strong arms hauled her up immediately. Vernon pulled her against his chest, his hands framing her face, his eyes wild with fear. "Are you hurt? Aurora, are you hurt?" "I am fine," she gasped, coughing up creek water. "Just wet and muddy." But Vernon did not let go. He stood there in the middle of the creek, holding her like she was something precious, his chest heaving. "You could have been hurt. You did not have to come in." "Yes, I did." She looked up at him, water dripping from her hair, and saw the fear in his eyes transform into something else entirely. "You needed help, Aurora." Her name came out rough, almost broken, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was desperate and searching, tasting of creek water and need, and Aurora responded without thought, her arms wrapping around his neck. Everything fell away except the heat of his body against hers, the strength of his arms, the way her heart seemed to recognize his even when her mind remembered nothing at all. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vernon rested his forehead against hers. "I am sorry. I should not have done that. You work for me and I have no right to take advantage." "You are not taking advantage." Aurora's hands were fisted in his wet shirt, holding him close. "Vernon, I feel this too. I have felt it since the beginning. You do not know who you are. What if you remember and you are married? What if you have a family somewhere?" The thought had haunted her, especially on nights when fragments of dreams that might have been memories flickered through her sleep. But standing here in his arms, Aurora knew with absolute certainty that whatever her past held, it did not include feelings like this. "I do not believe I am married," she said firmly. "Would not I feel it if I was? Would not some part of me remember loving someone else? There is nothing, Vernon. No sense of anyone waiting for me, no feeling that I belong anywhere except here with you." "You cannot know that for sure." "No," she admitted, "but I know what I feel now. I know that I care for you, that I think about you constantly, that being near you makes me happy in a way nothing else does. I know that when I imagine my future, you are in it. Maybe that makes me selfish or foolish, but it is the truth." Vernon pulled back far enough to look into her eyes, searching for doubt, for uncertainty. Finding none, he kissed her again, slower this time, tender and full of promise. "Well, that took long enough," John called from the bank, grinning like a fool. "I have been watching you two dance around each other for months. Thought I might have to knock your heads together." They broke apart, laughing, and Aurora felt joy bubble up inside her. Whatever came next, whatever her past held, this moment was real and perfect. That night, after they had both cleaned up and changed into dry clothes, Vernon asked Aurora to walk with him. They strolled away from the house as stars began to pepper the darkening sky, their shoulders brushing, hands finally entwined. "I need to be honest with you," Vernon said as they stopped near the corral fence. "I have not been with many women. After the war, I focused on building the ranch, on creating something stable. I convinced myself I did not need companionship, that being alone was easier. Then you stepped off that train, lost and hurting, and something in me just knew." "Knew what?" "That you were going to change everything." He turned to face her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I am not a rich man, Aurora. This ranch is profitable enough, but there are no luxuries, no fancy dresses or trips to San Francisco. If you stay with me, if we build a life together, it will be a simple one." Aurora reached up to cup his face, feeling the roughness of stubble under her palm. "I do not want fancy dresses or trips to cities. I want this. You, the ranch, a life built on something real. You gave me a name and a purpose when I had nothing. You showed me kindness without expecting anything in return. How could I want anything else? Your memory might come back. You might remember a different life, a better life. Then I will deal with that if it happens. But right now, in this moment, I am choosing you. I am choosing us." Vernon kissed her then, deep and slow, pouring everything he felt into it. When they finally returned to the house, hands clasped, something had fundamentally shifted. They were no longer employer and employee, no longer strangers brought together by chance. They were partners, building toward something neither had dared to hope for. The next months were the happiest of Aurora's new life. Winter settled over Montana with heavy snows and bitter cold, but inside the ranch house, warmth and love flourished. Aurora and Vernon grew closer each day, learning each other's rhythms and habits, building the kind of intimacy that came from shared work and shared dreams. They were careful, maintaining separate bedrooms, aware of propriety despite their relative isolation. But the love between them was evident in every glance, every touch, every shared smile across the dinner table. John teased them mercilessly but with obvious affection, happy to see his employer finally finding the happiness he deserved. In December, Vernon rode into Bannack and returned with a small box that he presented to Aurora after dinner. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small ruby. "It was my mother's," Vernon said, suddenly nervous. "She died when I was 12, but my father kept it. When he passed, it came to me. I have been carrying it around for weeks, trying to find the right words." He took a deep breath. "Aurora Galloway, I know we have not known each other long, and I know your past is still a mystery, but I also know that I love you more than I thought possible to love anyone. I know I want to spend every day of my life with you, building this ranch and whatever family we might have. I know that when I imagine the future, you are the only woman I see. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Aurora's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Vernon slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting for her all along. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you, Vernon. Whatever happens, whoever I was before, I know I could never love anyone the way I love you." They married in January of 1877 in a simple ceremony at the small church in Bannack, with John as witness and a few neighbors in attendance. Aurora wore a dress she had sewn herself from blue wool, and Vernon wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable but handsome. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vernon kissed her with a tenderness that made the assembled guests smile. That night, in the bedroom they finally shared, Vernon made love to his wife with reverence and care, taking his time, learning her body as he had learned her mind and heart. Aurora gave herself to him completely, finding joy and pleasure in their union, discovering a passion she had not known she was capable of feeling. "I love you," Vernon whispered against her skin. "My Aurora, my wife." "I love you too," she replied, holding him close. "My husband, my home." The winter passed in a haze of happiness. Aurora threw herself into being a rancher's wife, learning everything she could about the business of raising cattle. She took over the books completely, finding ways to cut costs and maximize profits. She learned to preserve meat, to make soap and candles, to do all the tasks required of a frontier woman. And every night she fell asleep in Vernon's arms, feeling safe and loved and whole. But in March, as the snows began to melt and the world turned green again, Aurora started having dreams. Not the vague, fragmentary flashes she had experienced before, but vivid, detailed scenes that felt like memories. She dreamed of a city, of cobblestone streets and tall buildings, of the smell of the ocean. She dreamed of a woman with her face but different clothes, different hair, a different name. She dreamed of running, of fear, of desperation to escape something terrible. She woke from these dreams gasping, her heart racing, and Vernon would hold her and soothe her until she calmed. but both of them knew what it meant. Her memory was returning. One morning in early April, Aurora came downstairs to find a stranger standing in the parlor talking to Vernon. The man was expensively dressed, out of place in their simple ranch house, and the moment Aurora saw him, a bolt of recognition shot through her. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, the name coming from somewhere deep in her recovered memory. The man spun around, his face registering shock and relief. "Miss Adriana, thank God, your father has been searching everywhere for you." Aurora felt the room spin. Adriana. Her real name was Adriana, and this man knew her father. Her past was crashing back like a wave, and she gripped the doorframe for support. Vernon was at her side immediately, his arm around her waist. "What is going on? Who are you?" "My name is Thomas Sullivan. I am an investigator hired by Mr. Edward Garrison of Boston to find his daughter." Sullivan looked at Aurora with something like wonder. "She disappeared from a train 6 months ago. There was blood in her compartment, signs of a struggle. We feared the worst." Aurora closed her eyes, and suddenly she remembered everything. Her father, Edward Garrison, a wealthy banker in Boston. Her engagement to Marcus Whitmore, a man her father had chosen, a man she had discovered was cruel and violent. Her attempt to run away, to escape a marriage that would have destroyed her. Marcus finding her on the train, their fight, him striking her head against the wall. And then nothing, until she woke on that platform in Bannack. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember everything." Vernon's arm tightened around her, and when she looked at him, she saw fear in his eyes. Fear that she would leave, that her old life would pull her away from him. "Miss Garrison, your father will be overjoyed," Sullivan continued. "He has been beside himself with worry. I will send a telegram immediately. He can be here within the week to take you home." "No." Aurora's voice was firm. "You will send the telegram to tell him I am alive and safe." "But I will not be going back to Boston." Sullivan blinked in confusion. "But Miss Garrison, your father, your life, everything you left behind, everything I ran away from," Aurora corrected. "I left Boston because my father wanted me to marry a man who hurt me. Marcus Whitmore was the one who attacked me on that train. He is the reason I lost my memory. I will not go back to that life." "Then what will you do?" Sullivan asked, clearly struggling to understand. Aurora turned to Vernon, seeing the question in his eyes, the vulnerability he rarely showed. She took his hand in both of hers. "I am staying here. This is my home now. Vernon is my husband. This life, this ranch, this is what I choose." Vernon's expression cracked, relief and love flooding through. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "Are you sure? You have a family, wealth, a life in Boston. I cannot compete with that." "You do not have to compete." Aurora pulled back to look at him. "Do you not understand? You already won. You gave me everything that matters when I had nothing. You loved me when I did not even know who I was." "How could I choose anything over that?" Sullivan cleared his throat. "Miss Garrison, I must advise you to think carefully about this decision. You were not in your right mind when you married this man. The marriage could be annulled and you could return to your proper life." "I was exactly in my right mind," Aurora said coldly. "More so than I had been in years. My father tried to control my life, tried to force me into a marriage that would have made me miserable. I will not let him do it again. You will tell him I am alive and well and married to a good man. You will tell him I am happy, and you will tell him that if he wants any relationship with me going forward, he will accept my choices." Sullivan looked between Aurora and Vernon, seeming to realize that no argument would sway her. "Very well. I will send the telegram. But I suspect your father will come himself. Then he will see that I mean what I say." After Sullivan left to return to town, Aurora and Vernon stood in the parlor, hands clasped, both shaken by how close they had come to losing everything. "Adriana Garrison," Vernon said slowly, testing the name. "You are the daughter of one of the richest men in Boston, and you married a cattle rancher in Montana." "I married the man I love." Aurora reached up to touch his face. "And I am Aurora Yale now." Adriana Garrison ran away and got hurt and lost herself. "Aurora is who I became, who I want to be. I know that legally my name is different, but in my heart, I am the woman you named, the woman you married. Is that all right? More than all right." Vernon kissed her softly. "But your father will come, and he will try to take you away from me. Men like that do not give up easily. Then he will learn that his daughter is more stubborn than he ever imagined." Edward Garrison arrived in Bannack 10 days later with an entourage that included his lawyer, his personal secretary, and enough luggage to stay for months if necessary. He was a tall man in his 60s, distinguished-looking, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to getting his way. Vernon and Aurora met him at the ranch, standing together on their porch, united. Aurora wore one of her simple work dresses, her hair pinned back practically, looking every inch the rancher's wife. Vernon stood beside her in his working clothes, refusing to dress up or pretend to be something he was not. "Adriana." Edward Garrison climbed down from his hired carriage, his voice thick with emotion. "My daughter. When you disappeared, when we found the blood, I thought you were dead. Do you have any idea what these months have been like?" "I am sorry you worried," Aurora said, her tone formal. "But I left for good reason, as you well know. This ridiculous business with Marcus." Edward waved a hand dismissively. "He explained everything, how you misunderstood, how it was all a terrible miscommunication." "He hit me hard enough to give me a head injury that cost me my memory," Aurora said flatly. "That was not a miscommunication. That was violence, and I will not marry a man capable of it." Edward's gaze shifted to Vernon, assessing and finding him wanting. "And so you married some cowboy instead? A man with dirt under his fingernails and dust on his boots? Adriana, you were raised for better than this." Vernon stiffened, but Aurora squeezed his hand and stepped forward. "This cowboy treated me with more kindness and respect in one day than Marcus showed me in months. Vernon gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. He gave me work and dignity and never asked for anything in return. He loved me when I did not even know my own name. He is twice the man Marcus Whitmore will ever be, and I will thank you not to insult my husband in his own home." Edward looked genuinely shocked. In all her life, Aurora realized she had never stood up to him like this. She had been the dutiful daughter, bending to his will, accepting his control. Losing her memory and building a new life had given her strength she never knew she possessed. "I see," Edward said slowly. "And you believe this marriage is legal. You had no memory of your real identity. Surely that is grounds for annulment." "I knew exactly what I was doing when I married Vernon," Aurora replied. "I may not have remembered Boston or you or my old life, but I was in full possession of my faculties. The marriage is legal and binding, and I have no intention of ending it. Then you will lose your inheritance. Everything I have built, everything I plan to leave you, it will all go to charity." Edward played what he clearly thought was his trump card. Aurora felt Vernon tense beside her, but she never wavered. "Then let it go to charity. I do not need your money. I have everything I want right here." Edward studied his daughter, seeing perhaps for the first time the woman she had become. "You truly love him, with everything I am. And you," Edward turned to Vernon, "what do you have to offer my daughter? What kind of life can you provide?" Vernon met the older man's gaze steadily. "An honest one. I cannot give her mansions or jewels or trips to Europe. But I can give her a home filled with love, a partnership built on respect, and the freedom to be whoever she wants to be. I can give her my loyalty, my protection, and every bit of happiness I am capable of providing. And I can promise that I will spend every day of my life trying to deserve her. Something shifted in Edward's expression. You really love her, more than anything in this world. Edward was silent for a long moment, looking between his daughter and her husband, seeing the way they stood together, the way their hands were clasped, the obvious love and commitment between them. Finally, he sighed. I came here prepared to drag you home, to have this marriage annulled by any means necessary, he admitted. I thought you had been taken advantage of, that you needed rescuing. But I see now that you do not need rescuing at all. You have found something that all my money and power could never buy. Father, Aurora said softly, hope flickering in her chest. I do not like this, Edward continued. I do not like that you are so far away, living a life I can barely imagine. I do not like that I have missed these months with you, that I do not know this man you have married. But I can see that you are happy, truly happy, in a way you never were in Boston. And if you are content to be Aurora Yale, wife of a Montana rancher, then I suppose I must learn to accept it. Aurora felt tears sting her eyes. You mean that? I do. Though I reserve the right to visit and to get to know my son-in-law properly. And if he ever treats you poorly, I will use every resource at my disposal to make him regret it. Vernon nodded solemnly. That is fair, though I promise you will never have cause. Over the following days, Edward stayed at the ranch, sleeping in the guest room Aurora prepared for him, eating meals at their table and observing their life together. He watched Vernon work from dawn to dusk, saw the obvious respect John had for him, noted how carefully he treated Aurora and how happy she seemed. He also saw his daughter in a new light, no longer the sheltered girl he had tried to control, but a capable woman who could run a household and a business, who worked hard and loved deeply. On his last evening before returning to Boston, Edward sat with Vernon and Aurora in the parlor after dinner. I have spoken with my lawyer, he said. I am changing my will. Half of my estate will still go to charity upon my death, but the other half will come to you, Adriana, regardless of where you live or what name you use. I cannot change who I am or the values I was raised with, but I can accept that you have chosen your own path. Father, you do not have to do that, Aurora protested. I want to. You are my only child, and I have made mistakes in trying to control your life. Let me make this right. He turned to Vernon. I am also arranging for a sum to be transferred to improve this ranch, not charity but an investment in my daughter's future and her husband's business. I have seen the potential here, and with proper capital, you could expand significantly. Vernon looked uncomfortable. Mr. Garrison, I appreciate the offer, but I built this place on my own work, and I would like to keep it that way. I respect that. But think of it as money that would have been spent on Adriana's wedding to Marcus, on her dowry, on all the trappings of a Boston society marriage. That money exists regardless. Why not use it to build something good instead? Edward smiled slightly. Besides, I am a businessman. I do not make investments I do not believe will succeed. From what I have seen, you are a shrewd operator, Vernon Yale. You will make good use of it. After some discussion, Vernon agreed, and Edward departed for Boston with promises to write regularly and to visit again the following year. Aurora stood with her husband, watching her father's carriage disappear down the road, feeling as though a weight had lifted from her shoulders. Are you sad? Vernon asked, his arm around her waist. No, Aurora said truthfully. I am glad we made peace, glad he understands my choice, but my life is here now with you. Boston is the past. This is my future. Vernon pulled her close and kissed her temple. Our future. The years that followed were full and rich. With Edward's investment, Vernon expanded the ranch, buying more land and cattle, hiring additional hands as the operation grew. Aurora managed the books and the household with equal skill, proving herself invaluable in every aspect of the business. She also corresponded regularly with her father, slowly rebuilding their relationship on new terms, as equals rather than parent and child. In the spring of 1878, Aurora discovered she was pregnant. Vernon received the news with such joy that he swept her up and spun her around the kitchen until she laughingly begged him to stop. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "A family." Their son was born that November, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's amber eyes. They named him Thomas, after Vernon's father, and he became the light of their lives. Vernon was a devoted father, somehow finding time between running the ranch to play with his son, to teach him and guide him with patience and love. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, whom they named Ruby after the stone in Aurora's wedding ring. She was fierce and determined from the start, keeping her parents on their toes and wrapping her father around her tiny finger within days. Aurora's father visited regularly, growing to genuinely love and respect Vernon, and forming a close bond with his grandchildren. Marcus Whitmore, they learned, had been arrested for assault in New York and had never bothered to look for Aurora after her disappearance. The threat he had represented faded into nothing more than a bad memory. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in Montana. Vernon's reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle spread, and he was frequently consulted by other ranchers looking to improve their own operations. But despite their growing wealth and success, Vernon and Aurora remained grounded, remembering where they had come from and how they had built their life together. On a warm evening in June of 1885, Aurora stood on the porch of their home watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Vernon came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. From inside the house came the sound of their children laughing as John told them exaggerated stories about the early days of the ranch. "You ever regret it?" Vernon asked softly. "Choosing this life instead of Boston society?" Aurora turned in his arms to face him, seeing the man who had given her everything when she had nothing, the man who had loved her when she did not even know herself, the man who had become her partner in all things. Not for a single moment. "You gave me a name and a purpose when I was lost. You gave me love and a home and a family. How could I regret the greatest gift I have ever received?" Vernon kissed her then, deep and tender, pouring a decade of love into it. When they broke apart, Aurora smiled against his lips. "Besides," she added with a mischievous glint in her eye, "I rather like being a cowboy's wife." "And I rather like having you as one," Vernon replied, grinning, "even if you still cannot rope a calf to save your life." Aurora laughed and swatted his chest. "I have other skills that more than make up for it." "That you do, Mrs. Yale, that you do." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Vernon and Aurora stood together on their porch, surrounded by the land they had built into something prosperous and beautiful, with the sounds of their children's laughter floating through the open windows. Aurora thought back to that day 9 years ago when she had stumbled off a train into the dust and heat, knowing nothing at all, and marveled at the journey that had brought her here. She had lost everything only to gain something infinitely better. She had been broken only to be made whole by a cowboy with sage green eyes and a generous heart. She had become Aurora Galloway, then Aurora Yale, and in doing so had found the truest version of herself. The Wild West was a harsh and unforgiving place, but it had given her the greatest love story she could have imagined. And as Vernon pulled her closer, his hand finding hers and their fingers intertwining the way they had that first night, Aurora knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as they always had. This was her life now, chosen and built with her own hands alongside the man she loved. This was her purpose, her joy, her happily ever after. And it was more than she had ever dared to hope for when she stepped off that train with nothing but confusion and fear. Years later, when Thomas and Ruby were grown with children of their own, when the ranch had expanded to become one of the largest in Montana, when Edward Garrison had passed peacefully in his sleep knowing his daughter was truly happy, Aurora would sit on that same porch with Vernon, their hair silver now but their love as strong as ever, and tell their grandchildren the story of how they met. She would tell them about stepping off a train with no memory, no name, no past. She would tell them about a cowboy who showed kindness to a stranger, who gave her a name and a purpose when she had nothing. She would tell them about falling in love while building a life together, about choosing happiness over obligation, about finding home in the most unexpected place. And Vernon would hold her hand and add his own memories, about a woman who appeared out of nowhere and changed everything, about learning what love really meant, about building something real and lasting with someone who chose him every single day. Their grandchildren would listen wide-eyed to this tale of romance and adventure, of lost memories and new beginnings, of love found in the Wild West. And when they asked if it was a true story, Aurora and Vernon would smile at each other and say yes, every word of it, and it had the best ending of all, because they had each other, and they had built a life full of love and family and purpose. Because Aurora had gotten off that train knowing nothing at all, and Vernon had given her everything. Because sometimes the best stories were the ones that started with loss and ended with joy, the ones that proved love could bloom even in the harshest soil, the ones that showed how two people could save each other. And on warm Montana evenings, when the sun painted the sky gold and crimson, Vernon and Aurora Yale would sit together on their porch, hands entwined, watching their legacy unfold in the laughter of grandchildren and the prosperity of the ranch they had built. They would remember that day in 1876 when a lost woman and a lonely cowboy found each other, and they would give thanks for every moment since. Their love story had begun with nothing, with emptiness and loss and uncertainty. But it had grown into something beautiful and enduring, something that would outlast them both and continue in the children and grandchildren who bore their legacy. It was a love story that proved the best things in life were not inherited or bought but chosen and built with care, day by day, year by year, moment by precious moment. And as the stars emerged above the Montana ranch, Aurora leaned her head on Vernon's shoulder and whispered the same words she had spoken so many times over the years, words that never lost their meaning or their truth. I love you. Thank you for giving me a name and a purpose. Thank you for giving me a life. And Vernon, his voice still steady and deep after all these years, would reply as he always did. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being my Aurora. And in that moment, in that place, with their love wrapped around them like a warm blanket, they were exactly where they belonged, exactly who they were meant to be, living the life they had built together from nothing but hope and hard work, and a love that had proven stronger than memory loss or family disapproval or any obstacle the Wild West could throw at them. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and deeply cherished, and it was perfect.